Ready.
Okay. I think probably the only thing more boring than studying is talking about how you should study, so I'll try to not bore you. I am Matthew. I work here at MF, and I actually had Ingrid and Randi's job before them, a long time ago. So I've been here a long time, but I am an American. I'm from the US. And so like many of you, I've experienced coming to Norway and having to learn how to study in a different context. And that's how I want to start, is telling you a little bit about how I felt things were different in Norway and how I've learned to cope with the way studying is different. And maybe that can help you find some tips or tricks to help you study. But I'll go ahead and tell you the conclusion right now. There are no tips or tricks to studying. Studying is hard work. When I came to Norway, I had studied a year in college in the US. At college in the US, you are given a syllabus at the beginning of the semester, and you know each week what you have to read. You know that at the end of each week there will be a quiz, and you have to do well on each quiz to pass the class. You have to come to class. You have other assignments for the class that count, and you have a midterm, and you have a final exam. The teacher tells you everything you have to do, and then at the end, your grade is a mix of your quizzes, your handouts that you've done, your participation in class, your midterm, and your final exam. Sometimes the final exam only counts for 20% of your final grade. So when I came to Norway, I learned that that's not how it is here. Many of you probably know this, but usually you have a final exam and that's all your grade, right? Counts for 100%. And some classes will have required attendance during the semester. Some will have a small assignment that you will turn in, but usually the whole grade comes from the final exam. And so I think at a theoretical level, what's different then is in the US, and I think a lot of other places, the teacher is responsible for learning. The teacher designs the course, gives you everything you need, helps you along, assesses you in a lot of different ways, and gives you your grade. In Norway, you are responsible for learning. I'll say it again. In Norway, you are responsible for learning. That means that when you get your syllabus and it says these are the books and this is the date of the exam, you actually usually don't have to do anything else. You can show up on the exam day, not having gone to a class, not having read any books, and take the exam. You will fail, but you can try. So what I want to talk to you about is how to get from that first stage where you see what you're doing to taking an exam and actually passing it. In Norway, you have to work independently. And part of this, I think, is the goal of Norwegian education, which is more a European system, which wants to teach you to be an independent thinker, an independent scholar, researcher, theologian, whatever you're going to be. They want you to be able to do it on your own, come up with ideas, come up with thoughts, and put them together based on what you're learning. So the goal in Norwegian education is not to know what's in the book, but it's to know how to use it. I think this is a very good thing because it prepares you to live real life in a job. When you get to a job, you may sometimes be asked to go and do a report on something that's already written, but normally you will have to construct something new. You will be asked to do a job that's not been done before in a new situation. And you have to find your own way to take what you know and what the situation is and make it work. So when you come to Norway, there's usually two different ways of having an examination. You can either write a paper or you have a classroom exam. So I'll talk about both. For classroom exams, I find that was the hardest thing for me, being a foreigner who was used to being pushed through the whole semester, that the classroom exam was the hardest thing to do. because I was given a list of books and then I showed up and I never felt prepared. My first years, I always felt like, I don't know what's coming. I don't know what can happen. But then I learned that you can know what's going to happen. When you study a class in Norway, a subject in Norway, you will be given a list of the goals for the course. What are you supposed to learn? And you have the books. So what do? And now I'm being very specific. You take the books, you look at the books and say, what goals do these books actually meet? What learning outcomes am I supposed to be learning from the books that they've assigned me to read? I learned that in probably my 3rd or 4th year in Norway, I learned that, the easiest way to know what's coming on an exam is to think, if I was the teacher, what questions would I ask on an exam for this course? Try to switch things up. And so by asking yourself those questions, what would this book here, what questions could they ask me about it on an exam? And then reading and working, trying to answer those questions. So that when I get to the exam, I think, okay, I have all these ideas that they could ask me, and you know what, sometimes I've got it exactly right. It's possible. So when you start to read, I'm not supposed to move around because the camera's on, so try to stand still. Those of you who have had me know that I wander around the auditorium, kind of, but so I'll try to be good here. When you start to read a book, and you know that you're going to have this book for a classroom exam that's 4 hours long, that you're going to have to write something, how do you do it? Well, I'll give you some tips. One, know what you're going to read and why. So look at your course description, the name of the course, the study goals, the outcomes, what you're supposed to be learning, and look at the book and say, why is this book here, and what am I supposed to be learning from it? So read the title of the book. So if you're taking a class in Old Testament, and you have a book that's called Introduction to the Old Testament, then you've got a good start. Look at the table of contents and see, what is it I'm supposed to read? And see, okay, these are the different chapters, right? So already there you can start to know what is the focus, how is this book written? Read the introduction. Don't just skip over the introduction to the book, because the introduction will give you a way of knowing what's coming. And then what I've told some of you in this room lots of times, read the book. It sounds silly, but when I was a student here, I remember having these discussions right before we'd go into the exam room. And I'd ask my fellow students, so have you read? And they'd say, well, I've looked through it. I'd say, you've looked through it? Have you read it? Well, I've skimmed through it. I haven't really read the whole thing. And I don't know if that's Norwegian, like janteloven, that you just have to pretend like you don't work as hard as you really do so that people don't think you're trying to be better. I don't know if this is a true thing, but it's because there's this humility thing that I don't get. But I think that you should read the whole book that's assigned. So do all the work, okay? And when you read, it helps to take notes. It helps to do something active, to say, what questions am I looking for the answers to, and what do I think about what's being said? Your mind works in a way that if you start to engage with what you're reading, you'll remember it better than if you just try to get it in. Okay? Because this is your job. It's your job to learn it, and the teacher isn't going to come ask you, now, are you sure you've understood what you read? They might ask you a question in the lecture. You might have general questions. They will cover much of the same stuff. The teachers will cover much of the same stuff in the lectures. But if you don't show up for lectures or you haven't read before, it's kind of hard. So be prepared. Read what you need to read and try to read it throughout the semester so that if you get to things that you don't understand, you can ask. It's very hard to read 3,000 pages in 2 weeks and remember everything. And I'm sure some of you have tried because of the way some people are laughing. So it's important to read your books. Don't think I can stress that enough. But then, how do you read specifically for an exam? I would say read it twice. Read it once where you read it, take notes, think about it. If you're the kind of reader who likes to draw like networks on your paper and say where ideas connect together and do that, do it. But also, you can read quickly through and review and remind yourself of what you've read at the end. So leave yourself time so that the last 2 weeks of the semester is not reading your books, but rereading your books. It's possible. It really is. But on to writing papers, because studying here often requires writing papers. How do you read to write a paper? And for me, that's quite different than how I read to just remember something. When you have a paper you have to write, the difference is that you need to know what you're looking for when you're doing your reading. The writing process is very different for different people. But for me, I like to know what I'm going to write before I write it. That sounds silly, but some people I know try to write their papers by just starting to write. They think that they kind of have an idea what the paper is supposed to be about, so they start writing. I would suggest when you get the subject of your papers, look and make a structure. What do you think this should be about? Then go find the books that talk about what you think it should be about, and see if what you think you know you should write about is what the books are talking about. So it's kind of the same as when I was talking about reading to learn, but instead of just going in, making notes for yourself, make very, very specific notes. When you're working on a paper, you have to say exactly where you get all your information. Citing where you get your information. Plagiarism is a bad thing. It has happened that people have been kicked out, lost their degrees, lost their right to study at MF because they go in and copy things straight off the internet or from books, put it into papers, and submit it as their own. Okay? You can lose your right to study in Norway at all, so don't do it. I said that. And be careful what you choose to put in. So being reflected about what you're writing helps you when you're reading. So think through what you want to say. What kind of paper are you writing? Are you writing to say, to make a big point? Then you need to find small pieces of information that support the point you're making. You also need to find things that go against what you're trying to say in the books. So don't just pick one side, but pick all the information you can on your subject and write about those things, specifically citing where you're getting them. So what I do is I open a new document on my computer for each book that I read when I know that I'll be writing about it. At the top of it, I write the name of the book, the bibliographical information, so I know what to put in. And then when I get to something I think I want to remember, I write the page number and I just type it. Type it in, either the idea in my words or the exact citation. That way I know I can go back and I can find that exactly as it was written. I can find the page, I can find the book, and I can make it fit into my paper. I don't always use everything I write like that, but at least I have a start. Because it's very easy to forget where you've read things. So go about it in a systematic way, and then after reading, working through your ideas, you usually develop a bigger picture of what you're going to write. When they ask you to write a paper, they want to know what you think. Want to know how you feel about a subject or how you connect different ideas together. So we want to know if you have understood what's in the book, but not just by asking, can you give me exactly what's in the book? But are you able to connect what different authors think, what different people think about a subject? Are you able to evaluate what they say? So your voice should shine through. This is my idea, this is how I think. And these other guys think so too. So working is a work process. Remember that too when you're writing. If you're going to write, say you're writing a 4 or 5 page paper, you need to set off time to write a 4 or 5 page paper. If you're writing a 20-page paper, you need to set aside that time. I always tell my students in the first year courses that write a paper that's 2,000 to 2,500 words, that they probably need 40 hours of work time just to write it. Okay? So it takes time. So don't get to a week before your paper's due and start working on it and think, I'll be fine. You'll be up late a lot of nights. The final thing I want to say is that it does matter how you present your paper, how you present things. Write academically. Try to write in a way that says, this is what I think, this is what this book says. Don't say, well, you know, maybe somewhere, sometime this could be true. Be specific and be clear about what you're saying. Edit your paper. So once you've written it, go back and reread it. Make sure your sentences are complete, that you've used spell check and everything's clear. Make sure your references are in place. Do things very correctly, and you won't have to worry about getting a paper back. I don't know if I've rejected any papers, anybody in this room, but I've rejected a lot of papers as a teacher here because they don't cite correctly where they get their information. And they fix it and they get it approved, but still, be very clear about what you have, what you're doing. Set it up nicely, write paragraphs, don't just have the whole text in one long paragraph. Make it look nice, make it into a nice paper. And it will be much easier for the reader, for the teacher who's reading it, to see how you go about your paper. Whenever I see a paper that has 3-page long paragraphs, I think, well, oh, do they have one thought that's really that long? I expect a paragraph should tell me about one thing, one idea, one short theme. If you have a 3-page one, you must have a lot to say about that. So space it up. It makes it look better on the eyes too. And the final thing that I want to say is that, again, as it's up to you to do your learning, you need to have a plan for your semester very early. I would always suggest knowing what's coming before it gets here. Okay? It might sound silly, but I think a lot of students forget to look through what's coming later in the semester already at the beginning. If you are taking 3 classes, that means that you might have 3 different assignments that you have to turn in sometime during the semester. You'll have a final exam, you might have an outing or something, you might have a time that you know you're going to be away, that you won't be able to do any work, you might become sick. And so if you put off starting your reading and your writing and your work, you will get in a big hole sometimes. Not always, but I would suggest looking at your schedule, looking at your reading, and start to plan how much do I need to do each week to get done. So planning, thinking things through, take responsibility for your work and your education. Okay? Good luck.
Thank you.